Hey guys, you get asked a lot about leak down test, so I decided to make a little video to show how to do a leak down test, because that's one of the main things. It's a pretty simple test you can do it yourself. One of the main questions I get asked, and what a leak down test does. So first of all, what you want to do is take your spark plugs out, and as we all know, that can be a pain in the car. And once you got your spark plugs out, you are going to want to find top dead center on the compression stroke. What I use to do that is a top dead center whistle. This thing. It's just a little whistle on one end and threads with the O-ring on the other end attached to a hose. So what you do is screw that in one of your cylinders, whichever cylinder you plan on testing. And you don't have to have one of these. You can also just feel with your finger or whatever if the cylinder is pushing air, because you want it to be blowing, because that means it's on the compression stroke. It's compressing those gases. So, whistle screwed in, and you want to take your 22 millimeter and spin the crank clockwise till you hear it whistling. Hear that? That means it's on the compression stroke. So you could just keep going until you hear it stop whistling and hope that's puts the piston at top dead center, which is the top of its stroke. What I do though is I stick something in there. I'm just going to use a head bolt. Stick it in the cylinder till it touches the top of the piston. Now you won't be able to use something like that if it's in the car. If it's in the car, I usually use the blunt end of a zip tie. Don't use this end because it can get caught between the piston and the cylinder wall. But you want to use something, just stick it in there gently until it touches the top of the piston. And then you're going to rotate the crank some more and watch whatever you stuck in there go out. When it stops going out is when the piston is at the top of its stroke. I think right about there should do it. Sometimes if you don't get it perfect top dead center and you apply the air pressure to it, it will rotate. So, alright, so now that you know that that cylinder is at top dead center on the compression stroke, so it is ready to be tested. That means the exhaust valves and the intake valves are both closed, and that cylinder should be sealed off where no air can escape it. Even a brand new engine does have some leakage though. You're not going to seal off a cylinder perfect, so a little bit of leakage is okay. Like I said, even brand new engines have some leakage. So you screw your tester hose in. I didn't show you that before I started the video, but you screw your tester hose in the cylinder. And I use an OTC leak down tester. It's got a regulator, port to plug up from your air compressor, and a port to plug your tester hose in. So you plug your tester hose in here. It's got 2 gauges on it. Okay, there we go. It's got 2 gauges. This gauge is for the pressure applied to the cylinder from your air compressor, and this gauge shows how much the cylinder is holding. So then you're going to plug your air compressor hose up to it. Now you're going to crank your regulator up. Start applying pressure. So you can go to 50 psi if you want, and go to 100. I do 100 to make the math easy. But right there at 50, you can see that, what do we got? We're holding 38 psi. So to make the math easy, I'd take it to 100. And that represents, to me, 100%. To make the math easy, again, right there's 100. So that represents 100. And this gauge is at 80, which that represents 80%. So 100% minus 80% is 20%. That's 20% leakage. This cylinder has 20% leakage. So that's how you do a leak down test and get your results. So once you got your results, what are you going to do with them? Well, that's where the difference between a leak down and a compression test comes in. Compression test will tell you how much pressure that cylinder can build, where a leak down test will tell you where that pressure is leaking. So once you got your pressure applied to it, you want to listen to where the air is leaking. If it's coming out of the exhaust, you probably have a leaky exhaust valve on that cylinder. If your air is coming out your air filter, your intake, then you probably have a leaky intake valve. If the air is coming out of the oil filler cap or the dipstick tube, then it's leaking into the crankcase, which means it's probably leaking past the piston rings into the crankcase. And if it's not leaking out of any of those and your coolant is bubbling, then it means you probably have a leaky head gasket. So I hope this helped everybody to better understand and know how to perform a cylinder leak down test. First thing I recommend ever doing when troubleshooting most problems when buying a used Subaru, this is one of my go-to tests. So hope everybody learned something. If you didn't and already knew, then thanks for watching anyway.